So I was prompted to make this video after coming across an issue when fitting these new headstock bearings and these seals in the original type of seals. And also it occurs to me that a lot of people may be inadvertently over tightening these bearings because they're not allowing for the slack in the thread. So firstly, the problem I had was that when I first assembled this up with the seals in the cups there, I found that as you adjusted up the bearings, these yolks became very tight and the seal cup jammed against the frame, and when you turn the yolks, the cup remained stationary, it didn't turn with the yolks. Well, that cup needs to turn with the yolks, otherwise you've got metal to metal contact between the yoke and the bearing and the cup, which is obviously going to wear. So all I had to do to get around that problem was top and bottom fit a 1mm shim washer between the cup and the bearing like that, and the inner race of the bearing. These are 35mm ID shim washer. I think it's actually 34mm ID of the bearing, but I couldn't find a 34 and that's perfectly close enough. They came from eBay, very cheap. I think it's 35mm ID and a 45mm OD, 1mm thick, and I found that just perfect. So you may, if you're doing this, you're planning to do this job, you may want to get a couple of those handy. I'm using these. I don't know why that's the case. It may be because these seals are a bit thicker in section than they used to be, or it may be because these tapered roller bearings are a bit narrower than the original cups and balls. I have no idea why. I just need to get around the problem. Now the other thing is, when it comes to adjusting these bearings, incidentally on this one, that bearing wants to be quite a tight fit on that adjusting up there, because if you get play there, obviously no amount of adjustment will take out the play. So what I'll do later, before I finally fit this probably, is just clean all the grease off that and put a bit of Loctite between the two. Anyway, to get the adjustment right, I suggest what you do is assemble it up firstly without the seals. But with the shim washers, obviously. Because that's dropped straight off there, so that's not tight enough, so I will put some Loctite in that later. Now what you're aiming for is a small amount of preload on these bearings, but not a load, just a tiny amount of preload, because if they're loose, it'll give the bearings more of a hammering every time you go over the pothole than if they're tight. And it'll spread the load over all of the rollers, and not, rather than just 2 or 3. So what you want to do is just adjust these up, so it's just nip the bearings up slightly, something like that. And then so that when you then later take it apart to put your seals in, you come back to the right position, take a depth measurement there, save that, or you could just count the number of threads, and also make a little mark it with a pen like that. And you're marking it against the yoke, not against the seal cut, because that's going to turn with the nut. But made a mark there. However, you've got to, that's not the mark I'm going to use, because you've got to allow for any slack in the thread. Because with this arrangement, top nut goes on, and you've got another top nut there that you welly up, that's supposed to be wellied up tight. So what could happen is, or what will happen is, if you leave it there and well it up tight, it will then take up all the slack in the thread and over compress those bearings. And that goes for any arrangement where you've got a adjuster nut and a lock nut. Another classic example is Land Rover wheel bearings, where I've seen people adjust it on videos, adjust it up on that nut and then welly up the other nut. In so doing, probably putting another half a ton of preload on the bearings and then wondering why the bearings are always wearing out. So what you're aiming to do is we'll slacken that off a bit so it's loose. And then put your top nut on there. We can do it without the yoke for now. And you're aiming for those bearings to just tighten up as you do this, fully tighten up this nut. So that's still a bit slack. That's too tight. Still a bit on the tight side. Yeah, so you could mess around with that, but sometimes you get it just right. You can just feel it's just pinched up the bearings there, but I think you can see what I'm getting at. That nut will take up all the slack in the thread and very easily over compress your bearings. So when you're then happy with it, then mark that again, and that's the mark you're going to use when you finally come to assemble it. Put your rubbers in, and then you tighten it up to that point there before you then finally assemble it, if you can see what I'm getting at, and then it should come right. So hopefully that's some use.